The galaxy had known peace for 10,000 years under the collective. 12 species lived together, traded together, and shared knowledge across the stars. But none of them had ever met humans. When the first human ship appeared at the edge of collective space, the sensors of the watching stations could not identify it. The ship was small, rough around the edges, and covered in strange markings. It moved slowly through the void, sending out signals in a language no translator could understand. Ambassador Krell of the Vorath stood on the observation deck of Station Prime and watched the alien vessel approach. His gray scales shifted color as he studied the readings. The Vorath were the oldest species in the collective, known for their wisdom and careful thinking. Krell had served as a diplomat for 300 years, but he had never seen anything like this. "What do we know about them?" Krell asked his assistant, a young Vorath named Senna. "Very little, Ambassador. Their home system is far beyond our borders. They call themselves humans, and they come from a planet called Earth." Senna looked at her datapad. "They evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme weather patterns. Their bodies are surprisingly durable." Krell nodded slowly. "And why have they come here?" "They say they want to help." The meeting took place 3 days later in the Grand Council chamber. Representatives from all 12 species sat in a great circle, and in the center stood 2 humans. One was tall and broad, with dark skin and hands that looked like they had worked hard for many years. The other was shorter, with sharp eyes and a straight back, wearing simple clothes that somehow looked like armor. The tall one spoke first. His name was Marcus Chen, and he called himself an engineer. "We have traveled far to find you," Marcus said. His voice was calm and steady. "Our people have studied the stars for a long time. We built machines that could carry us across the great distances, and everywhere we went we found one thing." He paused, looking around at the assembled aliens. "We found people who needed help." The collective members shifted in their seats. Help was not something they often asked for or offered. Each species took care of its own problems. That was the way it had always been. The second human stepped forward. Her name was Sarah Rodriguez, and her title was Guardian. "We do not come to conquer," she said. Her voice was quieter than Marcus's, but it carried a weight that made everyone listen. "We do not come to rule. We come because it is what we do. It is what humans have always done." Ambassador Krell raised one clawed hand. "Explain what you mean by help." Marcus smiled. It was a strange expression to the aliens, showing teeth in a way that could have seemed threatening, but somehow it felt warm. "On Earth, we learned early that we could not survive alone. Our world tried to kill us every day. Storms, earthquakes, predators, diseases. We were not the strongest creatures on our planet. We were not the fastest. But we had one thing that nothing else had." "And what was that?" asked Representative Yeel of the Krinath, her voice buzzing through her translator. "We had each other," Marcus said simply. "We learned to work together. When the river flooded, we built walls to hold back the water. When the ground shook, we learned to construct buildings that would not fall. When enemies came to take what was ours, we stood together and fought." Sarah continued where he left off. "Our history is full of darkness. We have made many mistakes. We have hurt each other in terrible ways, but through all of it, one truth remained constant. When the worst happened, humans rose to help each other. Engineers built what was needed. Warriors protected those who could not protect themselves." The chamber fell silent. The collective had never heard such a philosophy. Each species had its role, its place, its function. The idea of freely helping others, of building for strangers, of fighting for those who were not your own people, was strange and unsettling. Finally, High Counselor Emrath of the Telluri spoke. The Telluri were small beings, barely reaching the knees of a human, but their minds were vast and their influence in the collective was great. "You speak of helping others, but what do you ask in return?" Marcus and Sarah looked at each other. Then Marcus laughed, a sound that startled several of the representatives. "Nothing," he said. "We ask for nothing." That is not possible, Emrath said, his tiny eyes narrowing. Every exchange must have balance. Every gift must have cost. This is the fundamental law of economics, of society, of life itself. Sarah knelt down so she was closer to Emrath's height. The gesture surprised everyone. No species had ever lowered themselves before a telluri. "High Counselor," she said softly, "on Earth, we have a saying. A candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. We help because helping is what makes us human. We build because building gives our lives purpose. We protect because protecting those in need is the highest honor we know." Emrath stared at her for a long moment. "And if we refuse your help?" "Then we will leave," Sarah said. "We will find others who need us. There is always someone who needs help, always someone who is afraid, always something that needs to be built." The debate among the collective lasted for 17 days. Some argued that the humans should be sent away. Their philosophy was dangerous, they said. It could upset the careful balance that had kept peace for so long. Others argued that perhaps the humans could be useful, but only under strict control and observation. In the end, it was the Vorath who made the decision. Ambassador Krell stood before the council and spoke words that would change the galaxy forever. "We will accept the humans' offer," he said. "Not because we need their help, not because we trust them, but because I have looked into their eyes and seen something I have not seen in 10,000 years of peace." "And what is that?" asked Representative Yeel. "Hope," Krell said. "And perhaps, just perhaps, we have forgotten what that looks like." The first human teams were sent out 1 month later. They went to worlds that had asked for assistance with problems the collective had been unable to solve. 20 engineers, 20 warriors, and they carried with them the strange faith of their species, the belief that no problem was too big and no person was too small to matter. They had no idea how much the galaxy needed them, or how much blood would be shed before their work was done. The planet Verath 3 had been dying for 100 years. The Vorath who lived there had watched helplessly as their atmosphere slowly leaked away into space, stolen by a decaying magnetic field. Scientists had studied the problem. Committees had been formed. Reports had been written, but no solution had been found. When the human ship landed, nobody expected much. The Vorath were an old and proud species, and they did not believe that these newcomers could solve what their own greatest minds could not. Marcus Chen stepped off the ship and took a deep breath of the thin air. His lungs burned slightly, but he smiled anyway. Behind him came his team of 5 engineers, each carrying heavy packs of equipment. Governor Threll met them at the landing pad. She was elderly, her scales faded to a pale gray, but her eyes were still sharp. "Welcome to our world," she said, her voice carrying a note of skepticism that she did not bother to hide. "I hope your journey was pleasant." "It was long," Marcus said, "but we are glad to be here." He looked around at the barren landscape, the domed cities that protected what remained of the population. "Tell me about your magnetic field problem." Threll blinked in surprise. Most visitors wanted tour and ceremonies and long formal dinners. This human wanted to work. "Our planetary core is cooling," she explained as they walked toward the nearest dome. "Without the heat, the magnetic field weakens. Without the field, our atmosphere escapes. Our scientists say we have perhaps 50 years before the air becomes too thin to breathe." "Have you tried heating the core?" asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, one of the engineers. She was small and quiet, but her mind worked faster than anyone Marcus had ever known. "Heating the core," Threll almost laughed. "That would require more energy than our entire civilization produces in a year." Yuki nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then we will need to produce more energy." The work began the next day. The humans asked questions that the Vorath had never thought to ask. They examined equipment that had been abandoned as useless decades ago. They drew diagrams and argued with each other and ate strange food from packages they had brought from their ship. 1 week later, Yuki presented her plan to Governor Threll. "We cannot heat your entire core," Yuki explained, pointing to a holographic model of the planet's interior. "But we do not need to. We only need to create strategic heating points that will restart convection currents." She indicated several spots deep underground. "If we drill here, here, and here, we can install thermal generators powered by fusion reactors. The heat will spread naturally through the mantle, and within 200 years, your magnetic field will be restored." Threll stared at the model. "That is impossible. We do not have the technology to drill that deep. We do not have fusion reactors. We do not have 200 years. Marcus stepped forward. "You have 30 years before the air becomes dangerous. That is enough time." He pulled up additional diagrams. "We brought fusion reactor plans. We can teach your engineers to build them. As for the drilling, we have developed techniques on Earth for reaching deep into our own planet. We will share those as well." "Why?" Threll asked, the question sharp with suspicion. "Why would you give us this? What do you want in return?" Marcus met her eyes steadily. "Governor, on Earth, we nearly destroyed our own planet. We came close to making it unlivable. And do you know what saved us? People who refused to give up. Engineers who kept working even when everyone said it was impossible. We were given a second chance. Now we want to give that same chance to others." The project took 6 years to complete. Human engineers worked alongside Vorath workers, teaching them, learning from them, building something together that neither could have built alone. There were setbacks and failures. There were arguments and misunderstandings. There were moments when it seemed like the whole thing would collapse. But the humans never stopped. On the day the first thermal generator was activated, Marcus stood in the deep drilling station and watched the temperature readings rise. Beside him, Governor Threll had tears in her eyes, though the Vorath did not usually show such emotion. "Your people are strange," she said quietly. "We know," Marcus replied. "I think," Threll continued, "that strange is exactly what this galaxy needs." While the engineers worked on Verath 3, the warriors were sent somewhere very different. The Kryneth were insected beings who lived in vast hive colonies. They were peaceful by nature, preferring to solve problems through communication and compromise. But they had a problem that no amount of talking could fix. Raiders had been attacking their outer colonies for decades. The raiders were members of a species that had refused to join the collective, choosing instead to take what they wanted by force. The Kryneth had no military tradition, no warriors, no way to defend themselves. Sarah Rodriguez arrived on the Kryneth homeworld with 10 humans who had trained their entire lives for combat. They wore simple clothes and carried no visible weapons, but everyone who looked at them felt a shiver of something primal, some ancient recognition of danger. Queen Yeel Mother met them in her grand chamber, surrounded by thousands of her children. "You are the warriors Earth has sent," she said, her voice buzzing with multiple harmonics. "We are," Sarah confirmed. "You will teach us to kill." Sarah shook her head. "No, Your Majesty, we will teach you to protect. There is a difference." The training was hard. The Kryneth had never imagined using their bodies for violence. Their claws were tools for building, not weapons. Their strong exoskeletons were protection against accidents, not attacks. But Sarah and her team were patient. "You do not need to become killers," Sarah explained to a group of young Kryneth trainees. "You only need to become a wall that says this far and no further, a wall that protects those behind it." She demonstrated defensive formations, ways to use shields and barriers, tactics for delaying attackers until help could arrive. She taught them how to protect evacuation routes and how to safeguard the youngest members of the hive. "But what if the raiders are stronger?" asked one trainee. "What if they break through our wall?" Sarah smiled grimly. "That is why you have us." She gestured to her team. "Humans are very good at being walls, but we are also very good at being something else." "What?" "The thing that comes after you break through the wall. The thing you wish you had never woken up." The first raid came 3 months after training began. A fleet of raider ships descended on a small Krinath colony, expecting easy prey. They found Sarah Rodriguez waiting for them. The battle was short. The humans moved like nothing the raiders had ever seen, fast and brutal and terrifyingly precise. They did not kill unnecessarily, but they showed no mercy to those who threatened the innocent. When it was over, Sarah stood in the wreckage and broadcast a message to the raider fleet. "Hear me," she said, her voice cold as space itself. "This colony is under human protection. All Krinath colonies are under human protection. If you come here again, if you harm a single Krinath child, we will find you. We will find your base. We will find your families. And we will show you what humans do to those who hurt the people we protect." The raid stopped, not immediately and not completely, but word spread through the lawless regions of the galaxy. The humans were here, and they were not to be trifled with. Queen Yilmother asked Sarah about the message later. "You threatened their families. Would you truly harm innocents?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "No," she admitted, "I would not, but they do not know that. Sometimes the threat of violence is enough to prevent violence. That is a lesson humans learned long ago." And if the threat had not been enough? Sarah met the Queen's compound eyes. "Then I would have done whatever was necessary to protect your people. That is what guardians do." The Queen buzzed thoughtfully. "Your species frightens me, Guardian Rodriguez. You have such capacity for destruction, and yet you choose to protect strangers." "That is what makes us human," Sarah said. "The choice. We can destroy or create, hurt or heal, abandon or protect. Every day we choose, and the best of us choose to help." The collective watched these events with growing amazement. The humans were doing exactly what they had promised. No more, no less. They asked for nothing in return. They made no demands, sought no power, claimed no territory. They simply helped. And slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to change. 10 years passed. The human presence in the collective grew from 40 individuals to 400, then to 4,000. They spread across dozens of worlds, and everywhere they went, they brought the same gifts: engineers who built what was needed and warriors who protected everyone. On the water world of Thessal Prime, human engineers helped the aquatic Thessari build floating cities that could survive the massive storms that swept their ocean planet. The previous cities had sunk one by one over centuries, but the new designs used principles from Earth's own maritime history, combined with materials the Thessari had never thought to use. "How did you know to anchor the stabilizers at this angle?" asked Thessari Chief Engineer Dahl, watching as the new city rose from the waves. The human engineer, a woman named Maria Santos, laughed. "On Earth, we had these things called oil platforms. They had to survive hurricanes and huge waves. Most people thought they were ugly and dangerous, which they were. But the engineering principles we developed for them turned out to be useful for many other things." "You learn from everything," Dahl observed. "Everything," Maria agreed. "Every failure, every success, every mistake. Humans are not the smartest species in the galaxy, but we are very good at remembering what went wrong and trying to do better next time." On the frozen world of Krenth 4, human warriors stood beside the crystalline Krenth as they faced an ancient threat that had awakened from the ice. The creature was vast and mindless, a thing of hunger and instinct that had slept for 1,000,000 years. The Krenth had no weapons that could harm it, no way to fight something so large. Guardian James Wright studied the creature from a safe distance. It was the size of a mountain, and it moved slowly but unstoppably toward the largest Krenth settlement. "We cannot defeat that thing," said Krenth Elder Crystalline Voice of Ages. "It is too big, too powerful. We should evacuate and let it destroy the city." "What is in the city?" Wright asked. "Buildings, history, artifacts, things that can be replaced in time." "And what about the people who cannot evacuate in time? The elderly, the sick, the young?" Crystalline voice of ages made a sound like breaking glass, which was the Krenth expression of sorrow. Perhaps 5,000. We have calculated that their loss is acceptable compared to the risk of fighting. Wright was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his team. Unpack the heavy equipment. We are going to fight. Guardian, the elder said, alarmed, did you not hear me? It is too dangerous. The mathematics of risk clearly show. I heard you, Wright said. 5,000 acceptable losses. But here is something we learned on Earth, Elder. There is no such thing as an acceptable loss when you have the power to prevent it. The battle lasted for 3 days. The humans used explosives and vehicles and weapons from Earth, things the collective had never seen. They harried the creature, leading it away from the city, keeping it confused and angry. They lost 2 of their own in the fight, brave souls who gave everything to protect strangers. In the end, they discovered that the creature's weakness was fire. Its ancient body, adapted to the frozen depths, could not survive sustained heat. Human flamethrowers and incendiary weapons drove it back, and back, and back, until finally it retreated to the deep ice and did not return. Wright stood over the graves of his fallen comrades. Crystalline voice of ages stood beside him, confused by the grief the humans showed. They died for people they had never met, the elder said, for a species they barely knew. Why? Because that is what guardians do, Wright said, his voice thick with emotion. We protect, not because we are paid, not because we will be rewarded, because there are people who cannot protect themselves and we can. That is enough. The story of Krenth 4 spread across the collective. It was told in halls of government and whispered in homes. Humans had died for strangers. They had sacrificed everything for people who were not their own. It was incomprehensible. It was inspiring. It changed how the other species saw the newcomers from Earth. But not everyone was pleased by humanity's rising influence. The collective had maintained peace for 10,000 years through careful balance. Each species had its role, its place, its power. The humans were disrupting that balance. They were not asking permission, not following protocols, not playing by the rules that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. On the neutral station of Halfway Point, representatives from several species met in secret. They called themselves the Preservers, and they believed they were protecting the galaxy from a terrible threat. The humans are changing everything, said Vorax of the Telluri. They are teaching other species to think differently, to act differently, to hope differently. They saved my colony, protested Representative Crystalline Voice, who had been invited to the meeting over the objections of some members. Without them, thousands of my people would have died. And now your people look to humans instead of the collective, Vorax countered. They trust human engineers more than their own. They feel safer with human warriors than with their own defense forces. This is dependency. This is dangerous. The humans ask for nothing in return, another representative pointed out. They have shown no desire for power. Vorax made a gesture of dismissal. Every species desires power. The humans are simply patient. They are building alliances, earning trust. When the time comes, they will reveal their true purpose. And what if their true purpose is exactly what they claim? Asked Crystalline Voice. What if they truly want nothing more than to help? There was silence in the chamber. Then they are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered, Vorax said finally. Because a species that helps without expecting anything in return cannot be predicted, cannot be controlled, cannot be understood. The Preservers began to work against the humans in subtle ways. They spread rumors. They created bureaucratic obstacles. They convinced some worlds to refuse human assistance. It was not open warfare, but it was opposition, and it grew stronger with each passing year. The humans noticed, of course. They always noticed, but they did not fight back. They simply continued their work, helping where they were welcome, waiting patiently where they were not. Sarah Rodriguez was called to meet with Ambassador Krell, who had become one of humanity's strongest allies in the collective. They met on a quiet observation deck, watching starships come and go from the trading station. "The preservers are becoming more aggressive," Krell warned her. "They are planning something. I do not know what, but it worries me." "We know," Sarah said. "And yet you do nothing." Sarah smiled faintly. "We are doing many things, Ambassador, just not the things the preservers expect." "Explain." "The preservers fear us because they do not understand us. They think we are building power, gathering allies, preparing for conquest. But we are not." Sarah turned to face him directly. "We are building something much more important. We are building a galaxy that does not need conquerors. A galaxy where people help each other because it is right, not because they are forced to. A galaxy where warriors protect the innocent and engineers build for everyone." "That is a dream," Krell said skeptically. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "It is. But humans are very good at making dreams real. It takes time. It takes patience. Sometimes it takes blood and sacrifice. But we never stop dreaming, Ambassador, and we never stop working to make those dreams come true." 20 years after the first human ship appeared at the edge of collective space, everything changed. Not because of politics or treaties or careful negotiations. Not because of the preservers or their schemes. Everything changed because of the darkness. It came from beyond the edge of known space, from regions no species had ever explored. It was not a single enemy but an entire civilization, ancient and hungry and utterly without mercy. They called themselves the Eternal, and they had been traveling through the void for 1,000,000 years, consuming every civilization they encountered. The first warnings came from distant monitoring stations, strange signals, ships that disappeared without explanation, colonies that went silent overnight. Then the Eternal Fleet appeared, vast beyond imagining, a swarm of darkness that blocked out the stars themselves. The collective was paralyzed with fear. They had no military tradition. They had no weapons capable of fighting such an enemy. 10,000 years of peace had made them prosperous and wise, but also vulnerable. Emergency councils were convened. Endless debates filled the chambers of power. Some argued for surrender, hopping to negotiate. Others argued for flight, abandoning the galaxy to the invaders. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody except the humans. Ambassador Marcus Chen, now old and gray but still strong, addressed the full collective council. Beside him stood Sarah Rodriguez, who had led the Guardian Corps for 2 decades. Behind them stood representatives of every human team that had worked across the galaxy. Engineers and warriors, teachers and builders, all of them united by a purpose that had guided humanity since its earliest days. "The Eternal are coming," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. "They will not negotiate. They will not accept surrender. They come to consume, nothing more." Fear rippled through the assembled representatives. The Eternal Fleet was only months away. There was no time to build new weapons, no time to train armies, no time to do anything but wait for the end. "But there is something the Eternal do not understand," Marcus continued. "Something they have never encountered in their 1,000,000 years of conquest. They have never met a species like humanity, and they have never met a galaxy that stands together." He stepped back and Sarah took his place. "For 20 years we have worked among you. We have built with you, fought beside you, shared our knowledge and our strength. Some of you welcomed us. Some of you feared us. Some of you tried to stop us." She looked directly at the section where the preservers sat. "But through it all, we never stopped believing in what we were building." She activated a holographic display, and gasps filled the chamber. It showed the collective's combined military forces, tiny and scattered. But it also showed something else. Networks of defense stations, hidden in asteroids and moons across the galaxy. Shipyards producing vessels based on human and alien designs combined. Training facilities where beings from a dozen species were learning to fight together. "You thought we were only helping individual worlds," Sarah said. But we were also preparing for this day, not because we expected the eternal, but because we knew that someday something would come, something that threatened everyone, and when that day came, we wanted you to be ready. High Counselor Emrath of the Telluri rose from his seat. He was very old now, older than any Telluri in living memory, but his mind was still sharp. You prepared for war without telling us. You built weapons in secret. This is exactly what the preservers warned about. Sarah nodded. Yes, we kept secrets. We prepared without permission, because we knew that if we asked, the debates would never end, the committees would never decide, and when the threat finally came, nothing would be ready. She spread her hands. We accept whatever judgment you wish to give us, but first, let us help you survive. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Governor Threll of Verath III stood up. She was elderly now, but the magnetic field generators her people and the humans had built together were still working, still saving her world. The humans saved my planet, she said. They asked for nothing, they took nothing, and now they offer to save us again. She looked around the chamber. I do not care about their secrets, I care about my people living through this. One by one, other representatives stood. The Krinath, whose colonies were now protected by warriors trained in human methods. The Thessari, whose floating cities had survived storms that would have destroyed them before. The Krenth, who would never forget the humans who had died to save 5,000 strangers. Even the preservers were silent. What could they say? The humans had been right. The darkness had come, and without human preparation, the collective would have been helpless. We will stand with the humans, Ambassador Krell declared, speaking for the Vorath who had first welcomed humanity to the collective. Not because we have no choice, but because 20 years ago I looked into human eyes and saw hope. Today, I look again and see something more. What do you see? Sarah asked. I see family, Krell said simply. Strange, frightening, impossible family, but family nonetheless. The word spread across the galaxy. Family. It was not a concept that most collective species understood the way humans did, but they were learning. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, they were learning. The war against the Eternal lasted 7 years. It was the most terrible conflict the galaxy had ever known. Billions died. Worlds were destroyed. There were moments when it seemed certain that the darkness would consume everything. But the collective did not fall. Human engineers built weapons and defenses that the Eternal had never encountered. They adapted, improvised, created solutions to problems that had never existed before. When one system failed, they invented another. When one strategy was defeated, they developed a new one. They never stopped working, never stopped thinking, never stopped believing that there was always another answer. Human warriors fought on the front lines, leading forces from every species in the collective. They trained farmers to be soldiers and merchants to be fighters. They turned fear into courage and despair into determination. They died in numbers that horrified the other species, but they never stopped protecting those who could not protect themselves. And they were not alone. The Vorath fought beside them, using their ancient wisdom to outthink an enemy that had conquered countless civilizations. The Krinath used their hive coordination to move forces with perfect precision. The Thessari modified their storm-resistant cities into floating fortresses. The Krenth weaponized the ice of their homeworld, creating defenses the Eternal could not overcome. Every species contributed what they could. Every species learned from the others. For the first time in history, the collective was truly unified, truly one, truly family. The final battle took place in the space between stars, far from any inhabited world. The remaining Eternal fleet, vast but weakened, faced a combined armada that included ships from every collective species. Human commanders coordinated the attack, using tactics developed over 7 years of brutal war. Guardian Sarah Rodriguez, now scarred and weary but still unbowed, led the assault ship that broke through the Eternal defenses. She was 70 years old, older than she had ever expected to live, but she had not come this far to sit back and watch. "All ships, this is Rodriguez," she broadcast to the fleet. "Remember what we are fighting for, not territory, not resources, not power. We fight for everyone who cannot fight for themselves. We fight for every child who deserves to grow up in peace. We fight for the galaxy we are building together." She paused, looking at the eternal flagship through her view screen. "And we fight because that is what humans do. It is what we have always done. Let them come and let them see what happens when they threaten the people we love." The battle was brutal and costly. Ships from every species were destroyed. Heroes from every world gave their lives. But when the fighting finally ended, the Eternal Fleet was broken. The survivors fled into the void, carrying word of their defeat to wherever they went. The darkness had been turned back. The collective had survived. On the bridge of her damaged ship, Sarah Rodriguez sat in the commander's chair and wept. Not from sorrow, though she had lost friends beyond counting. Not from relief, though the war was finally over. She wept because she could see what humanity had helped create. A galaxy united. Species that had barely known each other now bound by shared sacrifice and common purpose. Engineers and warriors from every world working together, protecting together, building together. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. Everything humanity had come to this galaxy to achieve. Marcus Chen found her there an hour later. He was frail now, barely able to walk without assistance, but he had insisted on being present for the final battle. He lowered himself into the chair beside her and took her hand. "We did it," he said quietly. "No," Sarah replied, wiping her eyes. "They did it, all of them. We just showed them it was possible." They sat together in silence, watching the stars. After a while, Marcus spoke again. "Do you remember what you told Queen Yale Mother all those years ago, about choosing to help?" Sarah nodded. "I have been thinking about it," Marcus said. "The choice. Every day we choose to destroy or create, hurt or heal, abandon or protect. Every day for my entire life I have tried to choose to help, and looking out there, seeing what we have built together." He smiled, old and tired and utterly content. "I think we chose well." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I think so too." The reconstruction began immediately. Human engineers worked alongside their colleagues from every species, rebuilding what had been destroyed, improving what had survived, creating new things that no single species could have imagined alone. The war had left scars, but it had also left something precious, proof that the galaxy could stand together. The preservers disbanded. Vorax of the Tellery himself came to the humans with an apology. "We were wrong about you," he said. "We thought you sought power, we thought you wanted to control, but you wanted something else entirely." "What do you think we wanted?" Sarah asked. "A family," Vorax said. "A family that spans the stars. A family that fights together and builds together and helps each other because that is what families do." Sarah smiled, the expression still strange on her scarred face but warmer than ever. "That is exactly what we wanted, Vorax, and now we have it." 50 years after the first human ship appeared at the edge of collective space, a memorial was built at the site of the final battle. It was enormous, a structure that drifted in the void between stars, visible from light years away. Every species contributed to its construction. Every species was represented in its design. At its center was a simple inscription, written in every language known to the galaxy. Here in the darkness the light held. Here strangers became family. Here engineers built a future and warriors protected it. Here we learned that hope is not a dream but a choice, and we choose hope now and forever. Below the inscription was a list of names. Every being who had died in the war from every species. Millions of names, billions of names, each one remembered, each one honored. And at the end of the list, a final message. To the humans who came to help, asked for nothing and gave everything. You showed us what we could be. Now we will show the universe. Sarah Rodriguez died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92. Marcus Chen followed her 3 weeks later. They were buried on Earth, in a small cemetery overlooking the ocean, but memorials to them existed on 1,000 worlds. They had become more than individuals, more than heroes. They had become symbols of what humanity had offered to the galaxy. And the galaxy never forgot. The collective expanded, growing stronger and more united with each passing year. New species were discovered and welcomed. Old conflicts were resolved. Engineers built wonders that previous generations could not have imagined. Warriors protected every world, every colony, every family. And everywhere in the galaxy, the philosophy that humanity had brought spread and flourished. The idea that helping others is its own reward. The belief that no one is too small to matter. The faith that together we can overcome anything. 1,000 years after the war, long after the original humans had passed into legend, a young Voreth student asked his teacher about the strange species from a distant planet called Earth. They were builders and protectors, the teacher said. They came from a harsh world that taught them to help each other survive. And when they discovered that they were not alone in the universe, they did what they had always done. They helped. But why, the student asked, what did they gain? The teacher smiled, an expression his species had learned from the humans. They gained us. They gained a family that spans the stars. They gained the knowledge that their lives had meaning, that their sacrifices mattered, that the universe was better because they existed. The student thought about this for a long moment. Is that enough? For humans, the teacher said, it was everything. And across the galaxy, in every language, on every world, beings of every species carried forward the legacy of Earth. They built with human determination. They protected with human courage. They hoped with human faith. They had learned what humanity had always known, that we are strongest when we help each other, that we are bravest when we protect the innocent, that we are best when we choose to build rather than destroy. Earth had sent engineers who built civilizations and warriors who protected everyone. And the galaxy had become their family. Forever,